All right, so thank you everyone for joining the Boston Office 365 user group during the summer vacation months, to those in the room as well as to those joining us online. So I'd like to introduce the organizers. My name is Dimitri. I work for Turn Digital as a partner. Along with me is Bill Gunning, sitting in room number 3, and Dave Pileggi is somewhere. He's in the building. So the agenda for today, we're going to recap recent updates to Microsoft 365. We do not have the sponsor highlight today, but we do have a featured speaker, which is Mr. Bob German, sitting in the first row here. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A. We'll have a bit of a community chat, see if anyone's running into problems, see if there's anyone that solved a difficult problem you'd like to share. Then we'll talk about upcoming events in the community. We'll have a raffle, and then we have an optional mingle for those interested in person. So in terms of the last session, Joel Olson presented a great topic on preparing for Copilot. If you have not seen that, check out our YouTube page. It's a worthwhile watch. So updates from last time. So Microsoft Teams will very soon allow you to rename the general channel. So you no longer need to have general everywhere, especially for those that never use the general because you create your own hierarchy below it. Going to start rolling out in the middle of next month. This should complete by the end of next month. Some other updates. Is anybody here still using Teams Classic? Okay, I like that answer. So the support has already ended at the start of the month. And pretty soon, Microsoft's going to be rebranding the new Teams to remove the new icon on it. So if you go to start Teams and you don't see the new icon, Arthur, you no longer have to, ask if you're starting the old Teams. There's another new feature that's coming out, which is allowing Microsoft to detect and automatically hide inactive channels. So we've all been in Teams where you have maybe a dozen or so channels. Maybe there's a conference planning team. There's a different channel for you for every event. And pretty soon you get a pretty long list of channels that are there, and you can manually hide them, but no one wants to go through a million clicks, especially for busy ones. There's a new feature coming where you can have Microsoft auto-hide the inactive ones for you. Of course, you can always expand it, or you can always shut off that feature if you don't like it. But I think that's going to be welcome, especially for busy teams. Another pretty cool addition coming to Teams is bidirectional support for live interpretation. So today in Microsoft Teams, you have the ability to plug in a live interpreter. So let's say you're broadcasting your town hall in English, but you are a global company with offices around the world. You could have a live translator basically listening in and rebroadcasting the message in, let's say, Chinese to your Chinese attendees, right? And now this new feature is in a scenario where you actually have different languages that are going to be spoken. So for example, maybe your CEO kicks it off in English, but then the quarterly update is being handled by somebody in Egypt that's speaking their native language. So now you can have multiple translators speaking and translating into multiple languages. Pretty cool. All right, so another feature that I think I've been asking Microsoft for a very long time in Outlook is the ability to not only clear your people cache, your autocomplete email cache, but also to export it and be able to import it, right? So nothing's worse than getting a new laptop. You go to type in someone's email and they're no longer autocorrect, right? It guesses from the most recent emails as opposed to the ones that you actually use most frequently. Another new feature coming to Copilot for M365, and just a quick show of hands, who has the license assigned to themselves? A few of us. Who has it to at least some people in the organization? Okay. We are seeing the deployments ramp up, especially with AI being on every, Laura, I see you as well. AI being on every CIO's top of mind lately. So this next new feature allows you to schedule a prompt. So just like when you send a text message or even a Teams message where you can say, don't deliver this until a certain time. So this way, if tomorrow you want to remind yourself that you need to get an update on your to-do for the week or the day or whatever you have, that's going to be coming forward. There's new co-authoring experiences available with Copilot for SharePoint. So if we're inside of a text block in a SharePoint online page, whether it's your intranet or your team site, you will now be able to use Copilot to essentially rewrite text, change your tones, expand or condense the details behind it. So that's starting to roll out at the end of next month. actually this month, sorry. They'll be completed by the end of next month. So I think between this and there's some of the new image features coming for stock photos that you'll see here, it's going to make life a lot easier to create content pages. The next new update for SharePoint is a new content pane for pages and news. And as you can see on the right here, we'll have the ability to very rapidly insert images, search your stock photos, pull in other templates that you've predefined within your environment. So again, we're just making it that much easier to create content and lower that barrier of entry. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Dimitri. Appreciate it. So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity and some familiar faces here. So it's great and good to see you all. Thanks to the people online for joining in. So if you don't know me, my name is Bob German. And sometimes my clicker works. There we go. I am a cloud advocate, which means that I'm helping to advocate to developers and back to Microsoft on developers' behalf about the experience of building applications for Microsoft 365, which lately is all about Copilot. So that's the main topic here, is going to be how to build, how to extend and customize Copilot. I'm not going to talk about Copilot Studio, which is a low code. I'm going to talk about the pro dev experience, but in many cases, all you need is a JSON file. It's really simple. Dimitri?
I just wanted to confirm that you were sharing screen. It looks like,
I don't know what switched to when you sat down. So.
Well, that's using.
Bill, you're seeing it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Paul, do you rejoin me?
Yeah, I'll rejoin.
Sorry about that.
Sure. No, because I think this is coming through the long way. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I think I was going to ask for the same show of hands. How many of you using Copilot? Have you all seen it and played with it? Pretty much, mostly. Okay. So I'm going to demo it, but I'm going to demo it with these additions that go into it. So so you probably know then what it is. Microsoft 365 is a suite of services, and if you add some large language models and the new AI stuff, the internet graph, and these apps, you can actually have the AI work over your content that's in your emails, your files, your documents, your Teams conversations, your meetings, and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what it is. And kind of, I guess this slide was in case there was people who had never seen it, right? I might say, summarize my chat conversations, create a meeting agenda or something like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture. And in a way, this is going to kind of be, so, well, let's start with a situation. So I've got a user, and they're going to do a user prompt. And the prompt might be something like, what are the milestones for Project Falcon, which presumably buried in a document somewhere, right? And this is going off to Copilot. In a way, in this chart, you can think of the middle box as being orchestration. Anybody here know what AI orchestration is? So you probably have you heard the term? So it turns out, this is interesting, right? Turns out these large language models aren't as smart as you might think. And if you have just the raw large language model, which you can do if you go into Azure, OpenAI, Azure AI services, right? And you just start throwing text at it'll kind of go a little bit off the rails. Okay, so what you need, and what almost everybody from ChatGPT to Copilot has, is something called orchestration, which is a traditional program that's going to kind of put some guardrails up. It's going to do things like take your prompts, add things to them, add some more instructions to the AI, maybe take some other data from outside and add that in, and package this up so that so that the LLM will behave better. There's a great article, I didn't put my references, about Waluigi's. Have you ever heard of Waluigi's? So, and it talks about flattering the AI. It turns out if you say something like, you are an intelligent, honest business person, it will give you a better answer, right? You flatter it. They literally call that flattery. And then Waluigi is this weird, is the villain in Super Mario, I guess, right?
It's one.
If ping me or I'll send you the article. It's awesome because they talk about how eventually it kind of collapses on itself and starts behaving badly. And you've seen, remember they used to limit how many times you could prompt it because it would eventually kind of curl in on itself and go insane. So orchestration handles a lot of that stuff for us and makes it better. So you do the user prompt, it goes to the orchestration engine in Copilot. The first thing it does is called grounding. And of course, all this is the same stuff we've always done. It's just they have to have a new name for everything because, because we need to feel good about ourselves, like we know something nobody else knows. So it grounds it. Grounding just means getting more information. Got to call it grounding. So the first thing it's going to do is not call the AI. It's the first thing it's going to do is go to Microsoft Graph and the semantic index, which is a new version of the search index. So the old search index was syntactic, right? So it would take your words, the physical syntax of the words. Semantic vectorizes it into the meanings of the words, so which is better, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to go, so I asked about Project Falcon, it's going to go look for content that might have something about milestones for Project Falcon in it. And it's going to use a Microsoft Graph then to go, if you semantic search, it finds them, goes to the Graph, which is the main API for Microsoft 365, right? And it says, oh, there's a document here, there's an email there, and it puts together all this information. And it sends it back to orchestration, which sends it off in a modified prompt to, oh boy, that's weird. That works weird over Teams. So I'm not going to do that again. The mouse pointer is delayed because you're looking at Teams kind of going back through. Anyway, it sends the modified prompt off to the AI model. So finally we get to the AI model. But at this point, it doesn't just have what are the milestones for Project Falcon. It has what are the milestones for Project, it probably has, you are an intelligent, ethical, wonderful expert in, blah, 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 a little flattery. And then it's going to say something like, the user has just asked, what are the milestones for Project Falcon? Here are some documents and emails that may be relevant to answering that question. Now the AI can answer the question. Notice that we are not training the AI. As soon as this question is answered, the AI forgets everything about your data. And all it has is the built-in data that's gathered by training it on all this public web content. That is a pattern called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, where the orchestration is retrieving information and using to augment the prompt. So we finally get a response, and then we go back to grounding again, and some ordinary code checks with the graph to make sure that the answer is on track. If it is, we finally respond. So that's kind of what's going on under the covers in Copilot. And what we're going to talk about today is how can we add our data? So instead of just this graph stuff, how could we add our data to it and maybe some line of business system? And how can we even change the instructions? And the cool thing is, again, this is not, you can do this stuff with Copilot Studio. I'm like a traditional developer, so I'm going to show you how to do it with code. And some of the code is so easy that I think almost anybody could learn to do it. So there's two ways to do that, to change it. One is called a connector, and I'm not going to talk about those. That's where you take additional content. Maybe you take your customer database, right, and you feed it in using what's called a graph connector, and that pushes it right into the graph. Actually, that's been around as a search feature for a long time. So it's just now it lights up in Copilot. It's more valuable. That could be another talk for another day. I'm going to talk about plugins, which is where you're adding to that RAG pattern. You're saying, well, you know how to query the graph. I'm also going to teach you how to query my database for my line of business system, whatever you want. So come on, yeah, that's the one I'm going to show, right? Nice emphasis there. Okay, so there's three ways to write plugins. The first one came out at Ignite last year, And it's to write a thing called a Teams message extension, which is where you can kind of point at some business data in a menu and inject it into your conversation with your friend, right? If I want to send my inventory numbers to Dave, I can just sort of go find the product and it sends it off. The far side one is Copilot Studio, which is the low code way of doing it. I don't really know much about it, so I'm not going to say too much. The one I'm going to talk about was new at Build, and it's called an API plugin. So what's cool about this is, right, the web, we think of the web as being web pages, but many or most of you probably know that there's also web services. So behind those web pages, there are APIs using a pattern called REST that have data, and the web pages typically are not refreshing every time you change the data. Little pieces of it are retrieved using these APIs. Same with a phone app. The phone app is retrieving the data via these APIs. What we've done is any API now can be declared as part of that RAG pattern, and it bring the data into Copilot. So this turns out to be very cool. And so let me show a little demo. So my scenario is a consulting company. Any consultants here? Right? Okay, so here we go. So here I am in Copilot. When you want to use a plugin, any one of those types of plugins, the first thing you have to do is go to the plugin panel and go find it and turn it on. So you could have 50 plugins. You don't want them all. You don't want to query 50 databases everything you say. So I'm going to turn on this one for Trey. This is my dev machine, so I've got a few of them. So I'm going to turn on the one that I want, that I know works. And you might notice that now it says try it now. So it says Trey is on, try it now. So I'll click that, and what I get is some prompt suggestions. So it's kind of teaching me as a user, hey, these are some things you could do. So what Trey projects am I assigned to? Bill my hours, stuff like that. All right, I'll pick the first one. What Trey projects am I assigned to? And it's going to come back, and it's got it. It knows the data. Now, what I'll point out is on the bottom of my screen, and it might be a little hard to see. Can you see that? And maybe somebody could turn down the lights if not, but that's my log file. So the reason I chose the gold one is that's the one that's wired up to actually see the logs files go through. And so it's done a GET request for /API/me. So that's my backend API. And it's just a bunch of Azure functions. And I'm going to share the code with you at the end. So API/me gets information about the logged in user. And it knows these are my projects. I'm working on Woodgrove Bank and a network security review for Bellows College. All right, so let's try another one. I know that we're starting a new project over at Southridge Video, and they need a C# developer. So let's see if the plugin can help me with that. So I'm going to say I need a Trey consultant who knows C# and is available immediately. So this time it issued a query for /API/consultants. And if you look at the parameters, you'll see it filled in the skill has to be C#. Hours available is equal to 1. So it was smart enough to know that when I said available immediately, how that would translate into the API is I have 1 or more hour available. And I got back an answer. Now, you might know these people because these are my teammates in the advocacy team. They make videos and stuff. Robbie Williams is based in Brisbane. She co-authored the demo with me, the demo code. That was fun collaborating with her, except for the time zones. And I love working with her, though. She's so creative. And Gary Trinder, who is based in London, who wrote a tool that I'll talk about later that is useful in kind of documenting your API so that you can give it to Copilot. So they're both awesome. How am I going to choose? Probably makes sense to choose one that's close to the customer. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, which is closer to the Southridge project? I didn't think this was going to work. But freaking Copilot, it did it. So it queried my project. You can see get projects, and it queried my consultants. It got both of their locations. It went onto the web. It calculated the number of miles, and it's telling me that Rabia is only 570 miles away, whereas Gary is 10,559 miles. Okay. Not only that, but it inferred that maybe the reason I was asking these questions is because I'd want to put one of them on the project. So it says, would you like me to put Rabia on the project? Because she's closer, and I wouldn't have asked these questions of a consulting app. I didn't code any of this, people. It's just this API. I'm giving it the information, and I'll show you the JSON file where I documented the API in a way, or actually that was Robbie's part of the project she was packaging. I knew I would tear all my hair out. But the product, this was before build, and the product wasn't working yet. It's much better now. It's getting better, and I'm hoping next month we'll have public preview so you can try this and it'll be stable. But anyways, it figured that out. So I'm like, sure, go ahead. Please assign Rabia as a developer. Now what you're going to see is a thing called a confirmation card. So before you update the data, do a post request in the API, there's a rule. You got to check with the user. Don't go updating the data unless you make sure that it's really what they want. And indeed, it turns out we don't have this many hours in our budget. It wants to put her on full time. And so I'm gonna ask it to change it. Could you change the forecast to 20 hours? It's still 2 weeks worth of work, but the consultants in the room know how this goes, right? And so here we go. So now I have it 20 hours, perfect. And so I'm just going to go ahead and click yes. And if you check down at the bottom, you'll see that it's going to do a post request and add Rabia to the project. And then it's going to tell the user what it did. So pretty cool. So you might ask, so I can obviously have the log files. I wrote the web service. We know how that works. But what if I'm trying to kind of troubleshoot what's going on between the orchestration and the web service? So for that, we have a feature called developer mode. So I'll show you that. I'm just going to put developer on, minus developer on. And then I'm going to do another query. So I figure let's check and see if Rabia really got added to the project. I'm going to say, what projects is Rabia working on? Figured out that it was Rabia Williams from the context of the conversation. And because if you'll look in the log file, it actually queried for her whole name. And then we've got and it's got all kinds of details about the project and all this kind of stuff. So enabled plugins, I had the Bing web search and the trade research plugin. And it listed the 5 functions that were documented that it could do with that API. Then it told me that it selected the get projects function, which makes sense because I asked what projects, right? And then it called it, and you can see the request at the bottom, and it got back a 200 success. So that's how you would troubleshoot. So another scenario, because this is fun. All right, so oh yeah. So I want to bill my hours, but I can't remember how many to bill. So of course, every consultant has a spreadsheet somewhere. So I say, find my hours spreadsheet on OneDrive, get the hours for Woodgrove and bill it. This was another one I wasn't sure it was going to work, but it worked first try. Other things didn't work at all, but they're fixing those. The AI was good. It found it, it got 14 hours, and now I can click yes and go ahead and bill my hours. How many consultants want this? I wanted this, right?
Yeah.
But the most painful part of consulting is tracking your hours, I think. So that's cool. And you'll notice at the bottom, there's a post. Now, keep me honest. Let's look at the spreadsheet. You'll notice towards the top of the screen is my hours. So Copilot likes to reference things so you can confirm them. Don't steal my format. This is my fancy spreadsheet. You can see where it actually opened the spreadsheet, figured out what was going on, and built the correct number. So I'm pretty excited about this. You can probably tell. Let's take a look at the code. So this is where I've got this delay thing from Teams. I'm not used to having to use Teams, the Teams remote view as my local monitor. So this is the repo I'll send you to. And I'm just going to show a couple of things. Most of the code is an Azure function that implements, and it's a real deal, right? Like it stores the stuff in Azure Table Storage, it's persistent, it doesn't actually build the customer, but it actually does handle all those calls. And now I'm going to go into my app package, and the first thing I'm going to show you is the manifest. So if you've ever written a Teams app, this will be familiar. All Teams apps have the same manifest, the same as Teams, and you could mix and match. So you could put a Copilot, one of these plugins, and put a Teams tab and meeting app, and you put it all in one app package and install it as a single unit. But what I'll point out here is that down at the bottom, I have Copilot extension. And I've got two of them. One is a declarative Copilot, which I'll talk about next. And the other is my plugin. Here's my plugin is in tray-plugin.json. So let's go look at that. And what this is really doing is it's just documenting the API, saying, hey, Copilot, there's an API. These are the calls. These are the parameters you can pass. Here's the URL. And all that stuff is in here, and I won't go through all the details. I'll just point out a couple of features down towards the bottom. So most of this is little details. And so the thing that Gary built is this thing called the developer proxy. And developer proxy is a cool little tool. You run it locally, and it's like a web proxy, and you can do API calls. And it does a bunch of things. It's actually mainly meant for testing your web service. If you want to test your error handling, it can induce errors on purpose so that you make sure, what if I get a 529 back from Graph because it's overloaded? Well, if you've ever written to the Graph, you should be implementing that logic. But how do you test it? Hey, Graph, what if I blast the heck out of it and hope that I get a 529 error? No. So that's what the developer proxy does. You can set it up and say, give me 1 in 10 will be a 529. You can exercise your code. The other thing it does is it captures all the traffic and will generate the OpenAI specification files so that you don't have to do all this yourself. What you do have to do is type human readable descriptions. So there's a detailed description of every API call because there is an intelligence there. It just happens to be artificial. That's going to read that and figure out, oh, right, this is the one I have to call when he bills his hours. Localization is down here at the bottom. This isn't implemented yet, but this is going to allow you to localize it. So if you want, now Copilot's pretty smart. Like if you ask it a question in French or Japanese, it's going to answer in French or Japanese. But if your API returns English, what's it going to do? So this is going to have little replacement strings in it so that you can say maybe developer is something else in French, I don't know. And so it will translate the responses for you. And then here's those conversation starters that you saw, right? What trade consultants are assigned and stuff like that. So that's how that works. So if you go in and create that, there's one more file, which is actually a standard. This is the Open API standard. Again, even more detail about the API. If you provide it with this information, wrap it in a zip file with a manifest, and Copilot does the rest. You don't have to, in the old days, we used to have to write all this code to parse it, look for intent, look for entities, extract it, translate times into actual time and day, all that stuff. It's actually more intelligent than that now. So quick summary here, this is the format. So you've got your manifest points to the plugin, which points to the Open API, 2 icons. And the authentication, I'm told, I was away for a couple of weeks, so I'm told it works now. My job for next week is to get it working for my next version of the demo. So what you're seeing now is not authenticated, it's anonymous. And because when I did this talk at Build, there was no authentication. But they're going to support 3 types. One is anonymous, one is an API key, which is commonly used. The problem with the API key is you don't know who the user is, you just know that it's coming from somewhere valid. Or OAuth 2.0, which is the same standard that's used by Entra ID, so you can actually be able to authenticate the Teams user or the Copilot user. If you want to use that, maybe you only want to show people projects within their own region. You could go in and see who is it, okay, and go look up in the graph, what region are they in, whatever. The authorization is in your code, that's up to you, but we'll make that available to you. Any questions about this before I move on to declarative copilots?
Just to make sure I'm clear, the API key is also known as a service principal in Azure, or is it?
No, the API key is like, if you've ever called Open Weather Map or Bing Maps, they give you one long string that you have to, it's dead simple.
Yep.
It's not the most airtight security in the world, but if you can hide the key, that's fine. But if it's on a web page, good luck, right? But that's all the API key is. The service principal would be part of the Entra ID.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? So I actually think this next thing is cooler. All right, and those are declarative copilots. The idea here is that you want to build your own copilot. And this one I'm gonna attempt a live demo, because I think this is a lot more fun to do live, but it's also a little scary because the code is still very preliminary. So in order for this to work, you have to open this side panel. And this is where all your old chats go, but you can also now see declarative copilots and custom copilots here. So if you write a custom copilot with Copilot Studio, if you write a custom copilot with Teams AI library for Visual Studio Code, or in those cases, you're writing the whole thing. It's your, the AI, the orchestration, the LLM, it's all on you. But this is the third option, is the declarative copilot. So another one of my colleagues, Aichabash, wrote the geolocator game. Okay, and so this is a declarative copilot. Let's play the game together, shall we? Because guess what? I'm a lot better at computers than I am at geography. So let's play. See if Copilot wants to play today, because it worked. Yeah.
So is that still a thing where if it times out, you'll just do that?
Yeah, although I think it's kind of unofficial. I'm going to try hitting the new chat button. I'm going to try hitting refresh. I might just have to tell you about the game. It was giving me some errors before, but it was working at least some of the time. Oh, whoa, okay. Here's the undocumented little trick. In order to get the dog food bits to work, you won't ever probably see this. You have to open Outlook in another tab and then go back and hit refresh. Don't know why. It's some kind of an authentication. I think it's something that's timing out.
Yeah, it's a timeout.
So Outlook is forcing it to re-authenticate. Paint yourself. Hoping this would be impressive, so it can't let me down, right? Couldn't show you your Copilot chats. Why not? The one thing I didn't check at home was bringing up this web browser and then waiting a half an hour. This is also a magic URL. I'm going to try navigating to the magic URL. This little Avalon thing, that's an internal code name for the new version of the orchestrator that supports this stuff. Should have pre-recorded it. Well, the way that this works is it plays a game and it asks you questions. I'll give you clues. It'll say, there's a city with a beautiful bridge and famous opera house. What is it?
Sydney.
Sydney. There you go. And it'll ask you these questions. And it's pretty cool little game. And what's probably most amazing about it is that was when you see the code, it'd be more impressive. So go into the app package, and I'm going to go into, there's the manifest, but I'm going to go into the declarative copilot.json. The entire game is 4 lines. So the first one is the schema, the second one is the title, then the description, and then the game itself is instructions. You are a geolocator game copilot. Your role is to challenge, entertain, and congratulate players as they navigate through the game, guessing locations based on your descriptions. And it just goes on like that. It just basically explains the game, and Copilot makes it happen. So you can do this with a JSON file. And my next demo is pre-recorded, so it will definitely work. And I'll show one that is actually working. And this time I'm going to use the trade research example as well. So you can put instructions in your declarative Copilot, but you can also put references to graph connectors, SharePoint sites. So you can say, hey, maybe you're building a Copilot for benefits, and you're going to say, only use the files in this site to answer benefits questions. Which could be pretty useful because you probably don't want last year's benefits questions, right? I had a customer when I was doing consulting myself who had a bit of a mix-up because some guy looked up the paternity leave on their website, and he didn't realize it was the Australian paternity leave. So he planned his life around a different paternity policy. So, and then my mission was to fix their search, and it was pretty good actually. We did a lot to make it more relevant. But anyways, that's a common kind of problem. You don't want the wrong data. And then you can also add the plugins so users don't have to be trained to use that little plugin. So let's try it. So I'm going to go in, and this is the way it's supposed to look. Open up a little panel. I see all my declarative copilots. When you use one, you actually get a small branding experience. So up at the top of the screen, you get the name and the logo. To me, this is so much more intuitive, right? Like if you tell a user, hey, turn on this plugin before you ask questions about a certain subject, they're going to say, what? You know, it's like I've seen some usability studies already. It requires training. But if you say, hey, here's the virtual expert in benefits or in consulting, people immediately get it. Like I know there's certain topics Dave's an expert, I can go ask him, right? And I associate with people, right? So to associate something with a persona is a very normal human thing to do. So I'm going to ask a question. My boss wants a summary of all my projects. So I'm going to say, please show my projects along with a summary of what's in the statement of work document. I'm going to go use the API again to get my projects just like before, but this time it's going to go to a SharePoint site where I have all my statement of works, read the statement of work, and give me a summary of each project. So I can tell you the database does not have anything about the cost, the duration, the milestones. All those details are coming from the document. Furthermore, at the bottom, notice that it says, remember, always be billing. And if you need more details, please, if there's any confusion, check with your managing consultant. So remember those two things. Now I'm going to show one other thing, which I'll just click into one of those documents and show, yeah, there is a statement of work. And if you go into the demo site, you can see these documents. I'm providing the sample data as well if you want to actually try this. So I'm going to come back here and go over back to my tray sample. Take a look at the declarative Copilot. This is a better example. It's just not as much fun as the game. It's just another JSON file that you can link from your manifest. I've got my name, my description, the instruction. So check this out. Greet users in a professional manner and introduce yourself as the Tray Genie and offer to help them. Always remind users of the Tray Research motto, always be billing. I've done consulting too, you can tell, right? Using the Tray Research action, which is a plugin, you're able to find consultants based on their names, project assignments, skills, and all this kind of stuff. You can also find project details or the project client name, blah, 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 blah. Okay. If a user asks how many hours they have billed, that means that's the same as hours delivered. In addition, you may offer general consulting advice. If there's any confusion, encourage users to check with their managing consultant. And then if I scroll down, you're gonna see that I've got two more things in here. I've got capabilities. So I've got the URL of that SharePoint site where the documents are, and I've got my plugin. Okay, so the potential here is phenomenal. And instead of writing my own orchestration, right, what's it doing? It's taking the instructions, it's doing prompt augmentation, right? It's going to take my prompt, it's going to feed the instructions in there as well, so that it knows it's not just supposed to. I had one, which I hope to someday publish, I just haven't gotten. I have a Northwind sample, and I've done a bunch of things with Northwind database. But this one I decided to make the declarative Copilot be a grizzled New England fisherman. And yeah, and it does the whole thing, the accent and everything with the R, and it sounds kind of like a pirate too, but it was hilarious. And so it just injects your instructions. It goes and it tells the RAG pattern in the orchestration to only use certain SharePoint sites and to use certain plugins. So that's it, right? With this, imagine what you can build with this. And I didn't have to write any AI code at all. All I had to do was give the instructions, and then actually, Robbie had the hard job. So I wrote the API, which was a lot of code, but it was pretty familiar, just an Azure function. Whereas Robbie had to figure out the packaging format, which kept changing as we were leading up to build, and it was very hard to debug. So they've improved it. Now we have the develop. We didn't have developer, etc. So, anyways, here's my. That's about it. But this is my resource slide. So, documentation on Copilot options, API plugins, declarative Copilots. That tool that monitors where you can exercise the API and it generates the file for you. That's Dev Proxy. That's there. Teams Toolkit is what I used, or Robbie and I used to build the project. So that's just a plugin for Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code that makes it easy, does all the package, zips up the package for you and deploys things for you. And then that samples repo is right there, and the trade research sample, it's the same repo, but I've got it as well. So that's it. Pretty cool.
So when you're gonna create the HAL persona?
Oh, I never thought of that. And it's perfect for you. I'm sorry, Dave. Can't do that. Open the pod bay doors. Sorry, Dave.
Dave, what are you doing?
What are you doing? And then I can get it to sing Daisy at the end.
Yes. That'd be creepy, but that would work so well.
I think we have time for some questions. Anybody have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Any remote questions?
Yeah, anyone online, if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
All right.
I have a question. I was trying to pause politely for the online group. A couple things you said made it sound like this was not something currently available, accessible. You're talking about the authorization that was under development, things like this.
No, the entire thing. Everything you saw. I mean, Copilot is there. Message extension plugins are there. The whole API plugin and the declarative Copilots is currently in private preview. So you have to have been in, and I took the link down because I know they filled it. It's been going for ever since built now. They're predicting, it's not a promise, it's a prediction, a forecast. Maybe about as reliable as the New England weather forecast. I mean,
Yeah, good luck with that.
But anyway, they're saying next month we'll have public preview. Oh. So when you see the public preview, you'll see a bunch of stuff coming out. This will be part of that.
Interesting.
Anything else?
No, that was everything.
Cool. Do you think you might use this?
Yeah, for sure. So the 4 lines of code for the game, that was literally just verbal instructions. So
verbal instructions. That's it. And Aicha was clever because she thought of something that would be fun and useful using just some instructions. But
yeah.
It's kind of maybe obvious, but we call those instruction-only Copilots. And because, right, there's no data, but it has knowledge from the web. So it was able to make up a quiz and sometimes stump me on the locations too. Just based on its general knowledge. I tried to write a bartender Copilot that would give me bartender recipes. You know what the problem was? It knew too much.
Really?
It was pulling from general knowledge. So
Oh.
could you so I gave it I put some documents in SharePoint with my recipes. So Kate knows we collect in our house, we have a recipe file with all of our favorite drink recipes.
Sure.
And so I put that in the SharePoint, so I figure, I can use this, it's my property, right? It's our property. So I put it in the SharePoint site and I try it. And the problem was I have to keep tweaking the instructions. I'll go back to it. But I would say, recommend a whiskey recipe, and it would come back with something that wasn't in the recipe list. Because it actually knows how to make a drink without any instructions. Or without any
That's
special.
kind of freak. That is kind of.
So then I had to tell it, I kept trying to say, please only use the data from this SharePoint site. And I don't think I quite figured out how to coerce it into limiting its data, because I don't like whiskey sours. It kept coming up with whiskeys. I wanted a Sazerac or a fashion. It likes whiskey sours.
So do you find that going through the API, you're going to have more hallucinations than less because of the fact?
Not so much. I think it seems to know. Usually if there's hallucinations, it's because those files that document the API are not complete.
Okay.
So I had to spend some time, and again, this was more Rabia's side of the project, but we had to spend some time kind of tweaking those instructions. Say, if somebody asked this, use this call. It was pretty good at that. But in the early, and it was kind of in the early days when I did the bartender, but it wasn't an API. It was a document. I was trying to say, only use this document. And it did use the document. It's just sometimes it would pick another recipe that it knew about. And I can imagine that happening to a human too, right? If you say, here's our recipe book, and you actually hire an actual bartender, right? They're going to start making their favorite drinks as well. It's I kind of get it, but we've all got to learn how to write good prompts. And that was something that I felt like. But as far as the APIs go, yeah, pretty much. Well, okay, I would not throw, if you go into the README for the sample, I've got some API guidance.
Okay.
You don't want to throw the entire Microsoft graph at it.
I can't even imagine.
Don't expect it to navigate 100 API possibilities. Think about it from a use case point of view. It's like, I think users are going to ask these 10 things. So you make 10 APIs that correlate with the user intention and maybe have different parameters and variations, and then describe them in complete detail inside of that JSON file. So the Copilot knows, this is how you get somebody's hours right here.
So just to confirm that, you had those two configurable items, one called capabilities and one called actions.
Right.
Capabilities is really to try and shut down the knowledge base.
The shutting down would be in the instructions. So the capabilities are pointers to SharePoint, OneDrive, and Graph connectors. And obviously they call it capabilities because they probably have some others coming. But that's kind of like within Microsoft 365, here's some things that some resources I want you to use.
Yeah.
And then the actions was the plugin, was the API.
Specific plugin.
One of the things that you talked about was spinning up a new Copilot large language. Does it fully do a large language model?
Well, no, in this case, you're using the large language model that comes with Microsoft 365.
I was because I'm like,
So
that's a
you've
lot.
got to use the one that comes with. The other option that I was referring to is a completely separate option, which you're writing your own chatbot, basically.
Okay.
And they're providing the ability to embed your own chatbot into our user interface so that it looks right. You have the little thumbs up, thumbs down, you have reference markers, all that kind of stuff looks right. The idea is the user shouldn't really care, right? But you're writing your own chatbot. At that point, you could use any LLM you want. You could not use an LLM. You're just sending messages back and forth. The Teams AI library is a library that makes it easier to write to use your own LLM. So it has some code in there to do RAG pattern and stuff.
Yeah.
But it keeps track of, for instance, it keeps track of the conversation history. So if you go back, it remembers what you're talking about. How does it do that? Well, in this case, Microsoft 365's orchestration is just doing it.
Okay.
So every time you prompt, it's actually sending the entire conversation. Say, here's what was discussed so far, and here's the new prompt. That's how it knew when I said Rabia, it knew her full name. So it's not in Microsoft 365. It was something that was mentioned three questions ago, right? So that's all pretty standard stuff. If you want to completely roll your own, you do that with the AI library, and then you could use a different LLM, but you have to do a lot more work. And so it's kind of, there's a little bit of a trade-off if you think about it. If you do this method, you don't have to deploy an LLM. You don't have to pay for an LLM. Your customers already paid for it. They bought that Copilot license. And so you're using the LLM and the orchestration and the graph and everything that comes with Copilot and building on top of it, which is great if you don't want to like run up a big Azure bill. I
Right.
shouldn't be telling people publicly how to avoid spending more money with Microsoft, but hey, I have money management to do too in my life, so I understand. On the other hand, if you don't want to require them to buy Copilot, then you might want to do the other method where you write the whole thing. Now you've got to pay to host an LLM somewhere,
True.
right? I hope Azure, but maybe you do it somewhere else. It doesn't matter. We don't know. All we know is messages in and out, right? And the idea is you can mix and match these in a tenant, and users can just sort of go, oh, I'm going to go play the game now. Oh, I'm going to go look up my consulting stuff. And they don't have to think about, oh, I'm using a declarative Copilot. They don't even know what that is. They just know, oh, this is the consulting Copilot.
It's a long way from the Eliza program. Do you remember Eliza by any chance?
I do. In fact, one of my talks, I demo Eliza.
Did you really?
I've got a link to it. Somebody ported Eliza to JavaScript. And I used Plunker, which is one of those little sandboxes, and I've got a Plunk somewhere with Eliza in it.
That's amazing.
And it only works because does everyone know what he's talking about? Right, the original Turing test was if it passes, it's intelligent, or it's artificial intelligence, if a human can't tell the difference between a real person and the AI. And the way it was kind of clever, the way that they did Eliza, because they chose the role of a Rogerian therapist. Rogerian therapy is a psychologist method, whatever, where the psychologist basically just repeats everything back to you.
Yeah.
And so it was perfect, right? So it'd say, I'm so upset. What are you upset about? I'm mad at my mother. Why are you mad at your mother? It's like everything, you know what I mean? Everything you did. Or if you didn't give it anything, then it would start asking about your family because it knows, right? But, it was like, yeah, okay. It didn't pass the Turing test. I think the Turing test was passed about GPT 3.5. My view. I don't know if anyone, officially it's a little bit subjective, but it got really good, right?
Because I remember, I don't know if it was a folktale or what, that the CEO of IBM actually encountered Eliza and says, who is this? And she says, I'm Eliza, and then had a conversation because he kept getting madder and madder because of the fact that she kept basically parroting his questions. And it wasn't until like the next day he supposedly found out that he was actually talking to a program.
Wow. Well, there you go. But fool one person. All right.
Now, obviously with Microsoft's Copilot, you don't have to worry about data leakage. Like if you use your own LLM, you could have leaked company data and stuff out to the LLM.
Yeah, it kind of depends on where you put the LLM. If you put the LLM in, so what you're saying is true, first of all. Everything you saw in that architecture chart is within the tenant security boundary. And we don't train on it. So that means that it's the same as any other data. Plus you're going to it's the same as all the data in SharePoint stuff, or they would use the search engine. Also, you're going to get security training. You think about what it would take to implement that yourself. It's phenomenal, right? But you're going to get security training automatically. So if I say, what's the CEO's salary? And it's in a spreadsheet somewhere, but I don't have access to the spreadsheet, it's not going to know the answer. So that's a good thing. as far as your own LLM, I know, and it's minor sales pitch, but I'm not a marketing person, but if you put it in your own Azure subscription, then it's yours, right? That doesn't, everybody has their own whole copy of it. So it doesn't, you can train stuff and it's just going to be your copy that gets trained. I'm pretty sure, I don't take this as a competitive statement, but I think OpenAI does train on your data, which might be fine for some things, right? If I'm trying to write a Dungeons and Dragons, game, sure, have at it, But if I'm doing my company finance data or my medical history, you better not do that. So it really kind of depends on each LLM is going to have their own.
Which kind of begs the security when using the API, the Copilot API, and you do decide to go with a large language model, there's got to be some way to prompt or identify visually that, look, this is like have a warning sign or something when it's booted, air quotes, booted up and the prompt comes online that says, hey, by the way, this is secure, or no, this is not secure.
Yeah.
Do not put company proprietary data in here. We don't want to be the next
Right.
Amazon.
And I've seen that on some websites. I haven't seen it in Copilot, but I've seen it on some websites. Don't share private data here.
Because with all of the hacking and all these people out there that tend to do less, I mean, there's so many different.
I fed all the AT&T phone calls in there, and I haven't seen it.
10 billion, yeah.
Interesting.
All right, so on to announcements and things?
Yeah, sure.
So, all right, thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Great presentation as always.
Thank you, it was fun. People seem to have fun. There's lots of engagement, so it's awesome.
All right, so we do have a call out for speakers. Anybody's interested in speaking, please contact us. If you have any questions, we have some dates coming that are open. Let's see. Thanks again to Bob. And then for July, we finished that. And then August, we have an open spot. So we're looking for speakers. And then September, we have Mark.
I'm gonna have to come down and give him a hard time. You have to have bacon pizza.
Bacon pizza, that's what he likes.
He likes anything with bacon.
Right.
He's the bacon guy.
Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that.
Even Kate knows. Kate's laughing back there. My wife has heard these bacon stories. I have photos of him eating bacon, popcorn, bacon, cotton candy, all kinds of weird bacon.
Then we also have a speaker in October, and then again, November. I'm sorry, October's open, and then November we have a speaker.
He's a brilliant guy over at Takeda. He's been doing some really cool AI stuff. Good speakers.
Go to that. Okay, upcoming community events. We have Power Platform Conference in Las Vegas in September. Anybody in the room going to that one? No. And then Securing the Cloud, Achieving a Secure and Manageable Environment. That's in September here at the Burlington. And Collab Days, that typically was on Saturdays, it's now moved to Fridays. And again, it's here in this building. So I'm looking forward to that.
Has the call for speakers been announced for that one yet?
Oh, yes. And it might be closed. It's either closed or closing.
Closing, yeah.
Closing, all right. I've got it.
On that one.
It was June 30th was closed.
Oh, this June, yeah. Missed it by that much.
It's great. It uses all the rooms here and across the hall. So this place is pretty hopping for the Collab Days. A lot of people there, and a lot of speakers. And they also have different levels of from administration work to technical to really developerish. So you can find a niche for you, regardless if you're a developer, entry level administration. So. And so we also, Microsoft has a lot of community events online. I put these in Eastern time. I really recommend going to pnp.github.io and you can see these dates and times and they're great events to jump in on and listen. So
The small note is the Tuesday one is where the Microsoft speakers, and they are on hiatus until September.
oh, that's right. Forgot to mention that.
Whereas the rest of them are still happening. People from the community, it's great. He's right. It's great. Somebody from the community will get up and show their cool solution and kind of share it with the community.
I'll have like 2 or 3 people be
Very-
sharing. So
yeah.
they do like 10, 15 minutes, like 15 minutes each, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also a good place to get started. If you've never done speaking, they'll actually they'll actually assign a coach to you and help you.
Well,
And they'll even teach you how to use GitHub so you can submit your samples. They call it sharing is caring. It's
Yep.
a really great program.
It's a great community. So I always try to.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I love it. That's great.
I'm excited about all this.
Yep. So, and they have, a video repository, they have a GitHub typically, so it's really great to get involved and get started. And then additional resources in the area, Women IT Pros, Power Addicts, Power Hour. Please let us know if anybody knows if these are still continuing or not. I haven't checked on them in a while. And related user groups are also, we have Rhode Island, the Grand State, Boston Azure Group, which has Boston and North Shore one, and the Boston Power Apps and Power Automate. Again, these are good groups if you're getting into these areas more vertical. Hey, this is the part we open up any questions or tips. I know Bob here with a lot of LLM, but we also try to open up to anything general.
I'm going to use Copilot to answer.
They just blocked it in where I work, so no more ChatGPT for a lot of people I work with. Which I'm always very careful of. I try to be generic, and just, I just use it for like, give me some words and then I'll tweak it, Yeah. So anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I have one supposed to be simple. I have a tenant, one client is there. The email address no longer works in Outlook. So I threw it out, put it back in, and it keeps spinning and spinning. I went directly to the portal just to make sure the address works and the password works. But in Outlook, the Outlook app, it just spins and never connects.
External user? Is it a member of your tenant?
Yeah, and it's working on one of the computers, but I'm adding it to a second computer. It just won't come up. Is there something about two-factor authentication I have?
Try clearing your cache. It sounds more like a local cache issue.
Yeah, I think that's.
It could be a cache. It could also be the OST can sometimes cache some of that information. If you just take the OST out of the equation, set it to online only or whatever, or rename the OST and let it rebuild.
I created a new profile also.
Really?
Sounds like a local computer issue, personally. I would try another laptop
I was right, okay.
and then see if the problem moves with the user on a new device. If it doesn't move, it's the device. And that's usually caching or something. As the person online mentioned, I go to Outlook to the settings and I turn on and off that cache feature to kind of toggle it. That doesn't work, you know what I mean? But that usually clears it up.
Yeah, also, Arthur, is there a chance that they're using an older version of Outlook?
Okay, could be. I'll check how old the Outlook is on the machine.
Yeah, because only certain versions are supported. I believe 2016 might be end of life soon. And if it's an older one, it might not even support modern
No,
authentication.
it's newer than that.
Sometimes I've found that you need to go into Credential Manager and literally clear that cache out too, for Windows, because sometimes that gets hosed up real bad. I've seen that more than once.
If one email works, another one doesn't.
Or the old version of Outlook also.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Dimitri.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Turn Digital, for being a premium sponsor, providing the food and the venue and helping coordinate with the venue and everything. And a big thank you to our previous sponsors. And this is the part where we kind of end the recording. If Dimitri's able to do that remotely.